All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Slam, the podcast that reviews every single DC superhero ever created. I'm your co-host Mike Allen, as always. I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the origins of Aquaman.
the King of the Seven
Right.
Seas. Yes, one of my favorites, and I did use him on my Comic Book Syndicate business card. Never forget it.
Oh.
And it's such a special occasion that we have a special returning guest, Paul Carbonaro.
Welcome back.
Carbonaro.
What I was going to say, I'm sorry, I should have some kind of Aquaman greeting, but I don't.
Well, you know what? You've been on so many times. I think you need to have like a superhero name. Like I'm Mike L, and he's Joshua Mervell. So we'll have to think of a superhero name for you.
Yeah. Not one doesn't immediately spring to mind.
Okay, we'll work on that we'll put it on the back burner, but we'll definitely work on that. Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay. So anyway, before we jump into this, as I already mentioned, Aquaman is one of my favorites. I've loved him since he was on Super Friends. Paul, are you a fan of Aquaman?
No and yes. No
Okay.
and yes. Do you want me to give a brief explanation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry. You can hear my dog, can't you?
The dog doesn't like Aquaman either. We understand. All right.
I can get her out. Is she too much of a distraction right now?
No. I mean, she's very loud. But do you want to will letting the dog out help?
Yeah, you guys carry on. I'll come back to this.
We'll wait for you. Yeah, no worries.
We'll keep reviewing comics while you're gone. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna put a note here.
All right.
Okay, so we can jump right back into it. Paul's
All right.
gonna tell us his history with Aquaman.
It seems I can never give a straight answer, which means I think I'm a terrible guest.
No way.
No, not at all.
No and yes. Because when I was a kid reading Marvel stuff, the only one I didn't have interest in, there was like 6 different strips that I was able to get, was Submariner.
Mm.
And then Aquaman 2. And whenever I used to think about them, I used to think, wow, man, none of this makes any sense to me. It just what are you doing underwater wearing clothes? What are you doing underwater wearing gloves? What are you doing underwater with a gun, with buildings? And I could never suspend disbelief. Never. Not for a second. But then there are 3 things that I feel positive about. One was, do you remember the miniseries drawn by Craig Hamilton?
Of course. Do I own it? Yes.
Where he redesigned the costume.
Yes, the camouflage costume. We don't have any images of that, but I can try to bring one up while we're waiting. Yes.
When I saw that, I was really blown away because I thought, wow, now this is a character worth reading. Because the costume design was tremendous. And I thought, yeah, that's how a costume would be. It wouldn't be orange and green with gloves. It would be like this. So I thought that was tremendous. And I got every issue of that 4-issue miniseries. And then when I discovered, Peter David, he was writing it. Yeah. And I read it every month, every issue. I thought, wow, this is really compelling. He just made it so compelling, and I thought it was better with the harpoon kind of on one hand and the kind of ragged, the facial hair and this and that, and all the characters. Peter David made the characters so compelling that I really enjoyed it, and I forgot about the fact that I could never accept the underwater beds and the underwater this and the underwater that. And then the third one was one of the issues that we're covering here that was drawn by Curt Swan, but written by Keith Giffen and Robert Loren Fleming and so on. And it was just such a wonderfully told tale. And I know we're going to come to this later, that again, I think it proves that if the quality of the writing is good enough, if the characterization is good enough, if the stories are told well enough, then it becomes compelling. And I should also add a fourth one, the Jeff Johns, Ivan Rice.
Yes, New 52.
Which was also tremendous. So those four, I said three, but those four made me forget about all the nonsensical stuff. But aside from those four, no, I mean, I was never able to accept it. Anyway, I don't want to give too much away about the Giffen issue, because that I'll say more about that when I get to it.
One thing I want to say is that even though DC rebooted their universe in 1986 after Crisis, leading up to Crisis, there was also these mini revamps going on. Like, for example, the Atom with Sword of the Atom, right? He was kind of reimagined as this fantasy hero. You know, Superman was slightly revamped with a new design for Brainiac and a new design for Lex Luthor, right? So with these little side projects going on. And I feel like the 1985 Aquaman was also one of those ones. And I tried to send it to you, but of course the file didn't work. So it was very anticlimactic. I was as anticlimactic as Al Pacino winning announcing the best winner at the Oscars this year. But anyway, I'll try to find a better one. But anyway, the point is that it just felt like, I agree with you. Like, it felt like that Aquaman miniseries with the new costume, it felt like a new era. And I used to hate the orange T-shirt. I just thought it was an ugly, ugly costume. But yeah, when I saw that blue and white camouflage design, it just really made me feel like, oh, like, I really hate that expression, this is not your father's superhero, this is not your father's Aquaman. But that's what it really felt like. I felt like this is the new Aquaman. And it really worked for me. And I'm going to finally send it through. And now that'll work. Josh, I hope you can see that.
Yeah, I can see that. I can also pull it up here.
Okay. Have you seen this costume before?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
I'm with Paul. I love it. Like, they actually used it in the new Aquaman film, sort of. They used a version of it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Like, in the film, the costume sort of, it's almost like Rorschach, where it's always kind of
interesting.
Floating. I mean, this is obviously a little bit more of a primitive idea of camouflage, but in a comic book, it works perfectly. Right? So anyway, yeah, I'm with you. I love this design. But I still have a soft spot for the orange and the green. So anyway, yeah. Josh, tell us, are you an Aquaman fan?
I wouldn't say a fan, but I have read some Aquaman. I actually did read the new 52, a bit of the new 52 Aquaman. I think close to when it was like coming out. I think around probably like 2013 or something like that.
Sure.
So and of course I've read a lot of comics with Aquaman in them, but I think besides the new 52, I haven't read much about him or anything. So yeah.
I'll just say quickly, I once had a box of about 200 Aquaman comics, and I read virtually every appearance he had from the late 70s with Steven Skeets and Jim Aparo all the way through to the present day. And there are some good runs, there's some weak runs in there, but there's some surprisingly good stuff, even in between Peter David and Jeff Johns. There's a lot of lost, like, every writer seemed to have a completely different take on him. One would treat him more like, you know, Arthurian mythology. One would treat him just more like straight ahead superhero stuff. And Dan Jurgens, a writer I don't usually like, he actually had a fairly decent run on Aquaman after Eric Larson did. Now, I want to say, Paul, I actually just finished reading the Peter David Aquamans like last week, and I've been a lifelong Peter David fan, and I was not a fan of his Aquaman run. Now, it could have been because I thought the art was horrendous by
Jim Calafiore.
Yeah, and there was another guy, but I just thought the art was so amateur. It really ruined it for me. And I didn't like the harpoon. I didn't like the stupid new costume where the armor and the strap wasn't even on the same side as the harpoon arm. It was on the other side, which made no sense. Right. I didn't like anything about that. And then later on, he started to get webbed hands and scales, and I just, no, not for me.
I like a harpoon gun hand. For some reason, I think it's a cool addition, and it gives him another way of like traversing the ocean without like dolphin kicking, you know what I mean? Like just swimming or like propelling himself somehow with some sort of like water magic powers, right? So I do like the harpoon hand. It does kind of give him a little bit more of an edge as well. I don't think necessarily quite the edge that they were hoping for, maybe. Like it doesn't... at times it is a little bit goofy and like edgy for edge's sake, but...
Right, it's 90s, but it was also, to be honest, poorly drawn by the 90s artists. Some of the other guest artists were better, but whatever. There's a lot of great art on Aquaman, actually. I think he's... Again, the public sort of treats him like a second stringer. I've always loved him. I think he's great. I think there's a it's almost like if they do him right, it's like Game of Thrones underwater. That's how I see it. But anyway, he wasn't always that way. I had actually never read the Golden Age Aquaman origin until today, and it was I'd read it summarized before, but I didn't know what I was in for. This was a lot different than what I was expecting. Josh is going to sum up this very brief story and this very origin.
Yeah, it's really brief. This first origin is in More Fun Comics number 73. We see Aquaman here saving a bunch of civilians that were on this cruise ship that is being fired on by Nazis, and he boards he helps everybody board the lifeboats, and he swims over to the sub and hops on and kind of starts punching some Nazis. They close up the hatch and start swimming away, so he tells some of his dolphin friends to help him bring these survivors to shore, and he's talking to the captain here, and we get this kind of weird moment where he's like, "Hey, Aquaman, what's your origin?" So he just full out just like tells him the origin, and it's in these 3 panels right here on this page. He essentially is like, my mom died when I was really young. My dad was a scientist and studying the ocean, and he discovered Atlantis. So him and I actually lived down there in this like safe bubble, and he taught me everything I know about swimming and the ocean, and that's how I became friends with sea creatures. And then as he's running away, he said, "Oh yeah, by the way, my father died. See you later." And the tail, that's really all we get about the origin. The tail end here, we kind of just see him chasing these Nazis again. He sinks one of their subs, and then he ends up getting captured, and they tie him up and throw him into the bottom of the ocean with some weights, and he calls on his dolphin friends again to help save him. And when he goes back, he lobs a grenade into the Nazi hideout, and it explodes as Nazis kind of go flying everywhere. It's a real quick issue, particularly that origin. It's really just kind of glossed over. But I don't know. It feels like a comic strip, right? Like it feels very quick and not a whole lot of substance. But I think it being really short helped me enjoy it better. I think if this was dragged out longer, maybe I wouldn't have liked it as much as I did.
That's a great point. It was just the right length. And I just want to point out a couple important details. So we should mention Aquaman was not the king of Atlantis. He was not from Atlantis. He really didn't have any superpowers. He was trained by his father to be super strong and swift, and his father used 100 scientific secrets,
right?
Whatever that means, to help him. But as far as I know, this origin was never returned to for another 20 years. So this was all you got. So if you missed this issue, you were out of luck. Weird origin. I like the fact that in all of his origins, his father is an important character. In this one, I think it's remarkable that he's under the ocean learning these secrets in this house that's somehow protected from, the pressures of the ocean and everything. I think that's kind of cool. The story is pretty straightforward, but other than that, I enjoyed it. It's written by Mort Weisinger, who had a legendary run as the editor of Superman, and drawn by Paul Norris, who I'm not overly familiar with. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. But Paul, what did you think of this one?
A bit better than I expected it to be, I think.
Okay.
One reason was that I thought the art wasn't bad, and at times was actually quite impressive. The angles used and so on. So I thought, well, okay, the art is better than I was expecting, and at least there tries to be some kind of rationalization, for the story.
Sure.
I know, as you said, he's not the king of Atlantis. He's trained by his father and so on. So, it was all right. It was all right.
Okay, we should also point out that in this origin story, we're reading a reprint, but in the original story, this is very important, listeners. His gloves were yellow, okay? And they were yellow sort of on and off for 20 years. They didn't become consistently green until the Silver Age, yes.
That's interesting. I didn't even notice when I was reading it.
Well, it's because they're green in this issue. It's because it's been recolored. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But now another thing I want to point out is that if anyone hasn't guessed the theme of this show, here's the secret. We are reviewing every single superhero that was in either the Justice Society or the Seven Soldiers of Victory, with the exception of Aquaman, because we had to fit in Aquaman. Aquaman was not in the Justice Society, and he was not in the Seven Soldiers of Victory, and it's to this day I have no idea why. Because he was popular enough to not be canceled in the 50s, just like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Green Arrow. He was the only one, those five. He was one of the first to be on Super Friends, along with Superman, Batman, Robin, and Wonder Woman. So he obviously was popular. I just have no idea why he was not in the Justice Society or the Seven Soldiers. Paul, do you have a theory?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, Paul.
Maybe just not enough to do. Being an aquatic superhero, right? Like,
keep in mind, Justice Society's members included the Red Tornado, that's Ma Hunkel,
right?
What's the guy? What's their not Snapper Carr? Who was the guy? Oh, was it Johnny Thunder or Johnny Thunderbolt or whatever his name was?
Right.
The genie was valuable, but he was not. Anyway, I'm just trying to make a case for Aquaman here. But anyway. This was surprising. Not as cool as his later origins, but I thought it was a fairly decent story, fairly fun. And like you said, it was short enough that it was enjoyable. And for that reason, I would go on to read more, but it wasn't like mind-blowing or anything, right?
Yeah.
It was one of the stronger ones. But thankfully, in the 1950s, an artist named Ramona Fradon took over art for Aquaman. And unfortunately, she died only a few weeks ago.
Oh,
at the time of this recording. Yeah, she was 97. And I actually had the opportunity to meet her in Detroit. And she's one of two people who I could have interviewed, but I was just, maybe it was at the end of the day and I was tired. And I was like, I'll get them next time. Well, her and Herb Trimpe did not make it to my second interview, unfortunately. I'm really sad about that. But I've always liked her art. I think she's a great artist. She's most famous for creating Metamorpho. And having a nice long run on Super Friends, but most of all Aquaman. That's what she's most famous for. And it's not just Silver Age. She actually started early enough that there's this whole Golden Silver Age is there's a blurry line there. But she drew Aquaman for a long time, even before we got this rebooted origin. So yeah, she's definitely, I would say, like the Curt Swan of Aquaman artists. So we are going to talk about Adventure Comics 260. And this is, we should point out the first one had a Dr. Fate cover. This has a Superboy cover. So Aquaman was not the lead feature. In fact, I'd be surprised. I mean, he must have had covers at some point, but it was probably like, imagine like you have this character at the back of this comic who was just never on the cover. There's no way you're going to take Superboy off the cover to put Aquaman on.
Right.
So it was a rarity. But anyway, so this story is called How Aquaman Got His Powers. And basically, we have a nice opening splash page with Aquaman's father and this big, like, I guess, aquarium full of, what are those, like,
Swordfish.
Swordfish. And then the story opens up with a submarine testing some, like, basically nuclear weapons, right? Like, this is the atomic age. And this art as we're going through, I just love it. But anyway,
It's great.
It's great. Aquaman is riding on the back of two what kind of whales are those? Are those blue whales?
Yeah, maybe like a blue whale or a sperm whale or something. Yeah,
Okay.
They're huge.
And I gotta say, there's a great shot of him riding on top of an atomic warhead. That's freaking cool.
Mhm.
So anyway, as you can see, his gloves are already yellow here. So now he's going and he's talking to the commander of this vessel, and basically says, "Listen, I just want you to know you can't test here." And he's like, "Well, I've got orders. I have to test here." And he's like, "Well, okay, let me take you aside." And he's like, and he actually has a really good line here. He's like, I'll tell you why. It's been a dead secret till now. It concerns my childhood and how I got my powers." And then he's like, and then the guy goes, "You've always kept the facts about your origin a mystery." And Aquaman says, "Right. Now, two people will know the truth, you and I. My story begins more than 20 years ago on a lonely island." And we get the classic, famous origin of Aquaman that I think most people know. And basically, we meet this lonely lighthouse keeper. And I have to comment on the art as we go through because it's so good. But the guy is shining the what's it called, lighthouse into the water, into the ocean or whatever, and we see the wave. We see a woman on a like a
some sort of barge or
some kind of barge, and then the next panel is the mirror image of that. We see it from her point of view and the light coming at her, and she's on the barge. So he goes out into the water, rescues her, brings her in. And then it says here, because this is the 50s, they have to get married. And then a year later, their baby Arthur is born. And then and it's funny because he actually, in his thought bubbles, he's like, "Why does she sit there for hours staring at the sea? Why hasn't she told me where she came from or who her folks are?" It's just kind of funny, right? Like the naivete, but they got married anyway, whatever. So then we see these like shots of Aqua Baby, we'll call him, like playing in the water. And then the baby disappears for an hour, and then the father finds him at the bottom of the ocean playing with like turtles and fish and stuff like that. Then we see him playing with a shark, and he's A-okay. Then unfortunately, he gets a little bit older, and then the mother confesses on her deathbed, "I came from Atlantis, a continent that sank into the sea ages ago." And she basically, we see this gorgeous shot of the inside of this domed city with people standing there, and she's kind of standing there, and she's being exiled. The penalty for sneaking out into the upper world, permanent exile. Go forth and never return. So that explains why at the beginning of the story she was up on the surface, right? So then she's like, "You, my son, have inherited my ability to live underwater. You have the power to communicate with sea creatures, to perform great water feats, and to become ruler of the oceans." Very cool. So then the mother dies, and then basically, see, again, this is kind of cool because it's almost like it's close to the old origin where the father's not really teaching, and the father's kind of like bringing out his natural abilities.
Right.
So
yeah.
They've got this fish tank with the swordfish, and he's kind of training him to use his sixth sense of telepathy with the swordfish. And then we have a great shot where there's a squid stuck underneath an old, what is it here? A Roman galley. And he gets octopi to come and freaking, not to lift the boat, but to row the actual oars.
Right.
To move it off the squid. That is brilliant. So then we see that he can communicate with all the fish, and they're obedient to him, because he's the king of the seven seas and all that. So he explains his origin to so he's still no, sorry, I thought we flashed back, but he's still with his dad. So then he's like then we see how fast he is. He's outrunning a speedboat. Then we see his father's in trouble, and he dives in to save him, and then he's interacting with these luminescent fish, you know what I mean? And then we see that he's in school, and he's really knowledgeable about sea life, about, you know, how many species there are and different sharks and stuff like that. The teacher's all impressed. We see him riding a whale. And then, unfortunately, just like most DC superheroes, now his father dies, right? So now he's on his own. And then we flash back to the present, and he finishes telling the commander his story. And then the commander says, I appreciate your trust in telling your secret, which I will never reveal. But what's it got to do with my atomic depth bomb test? He's like, everything, Commander. One final secret. I'll whisper it. And he basically, this is where he tells him that the tests that they were, the warheads they were testing was near Atlantis. Now, this is the weirdest part of the story, is he swims down and he's looking at the Dome City, but us as readers in 2024, we think, oh, he's going to go back to his where he lives. No, it says, now it is safe. Had the depth bombs gone off, the ancestral home of my mother, the land of Atlantis, would have been destroyed forever. Perhaps someday I will return here. Who knows? So, and I haven't read a lot of Aquaman stories from this era, but as far as I know, he still had no connection with Atlantis other than what his mother had told him. So Atlantis did not come into the picture until much later. So there it is. He could see it, but he's not going there. He's going to plan to go back another day. So that's the end of that story. I like this origin a lot more. This is my favorite Aquaman origin, and I love the art. And I got to say, based on those two things, I would definitely read more of these, and I plan to get the archives or the collections or whatever it is. I really like this issue. Paul, what did you think?
I'm so sorry. I don't really like it.
Okay. Tell us why, Paul.
Well, right from the beginning, when he was testing his son in the tank with the swordfish, I tried to repress my ridiculous sense of humor. And I couldn't help but have a scene in my head where all the swordfish impale the young kid. And the father says, oh, looks like I was wrong. You know, that's the end of the issue. So I was off to a bad start. I already thought, oh, this is very funny. And then after that, just the usual stuff. I'm just not interested in this stuff. I'm just not, which is good. It's good that I'm reviewing the most recent one in 1989, because if I were reviewing the one that you just reviewed, unfortunately, it would be a real downer, I think.
Well, why don't you at least tell us, are you a fan of Ramona Fradon's art?
Most of the time. The first time I saw her art was when she did a fill-in issue of Fantastic Four in the early 70s.
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
I thought that was very, very good, and that's where I knew her from. I didn't know her from Aquaman. So, yes, I am. But again, you know, in this kind of time period in which this issue appeared, the art really, I don't really like it. And it's all so wordy, and the words, you know, obscuring the art, and the art is so kind of cramped. Even if you gave me Jack Kirby's art from like the 50s and the 40s, it's very rare that I like it. I think there's no comparison between Jack Kirby art in 40s and 50s with like end of the 60s and first half of the 70s. I mean, it's just mind-blowingly different.
He definitely was always changing. I do want to point out, I did have the hardcover of Fighting American, and I could not read it because I didn't like the stories. However, I did really like the art. So I do agree with you that his late 60s art was his peak, but I do still like his 50s art. I am a fan. So, but anyway, Josh, tell us what you think of Adventure Comics 260.
So the origin itself, I think, is pretty good. But I do have an issue with how it is told.
Sure.
I think that a lot of the times when we have origins that are just a character telling us what happened and it's a flashback, it's just like a panel with for the one scene, and then it's a huge dialogue box covering half of the art to explain what's happening in that panel, because we don't have enough time to see what is happening in those scenes. So I do think that the art is pretty good. The story is fine, but I do wish that we got to kind of see some of the stuff happening a little bit more in depth, rather than, you know, like this page, for example, oh, I explored the depths and these bioluminescent creatures, but then it's like, why do we need all of this dialogue and nonsense to kind of like tell us what's happening here? I know it's just like a very, very large chunk of this page is covered with the word bubbles and describing his origin rather than us kind of seeing what's happening, you know?
Well, it's just interesting because this was only 7 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have, if this, first of all, if this was published today, it'd be 7 issues, right? I'm not even exaggerating. I think it would be, but it is almost like there's a sweet spot because I do wish it was stretched out, but I do appreciate that it's done in one. So maybe 21 pages. What do you think? 3 times as many pages? What do you think?
You know, I think that if maybe it was if it was an origin that audiences were familiar with, I would be fine with it, right? Like if this was a recap of Batman or Superman, like everybody knows who this, like I can talk to, you know, any of my like coworkers or like my grandmother or grandma or, you know, my mom, they'll tell me what their origin is. But Aquaman, it's still kind of up in the air, especially at this time, this being the first like full origin. I think it does feel just a little bit too much going on for the small amount of pages we've got.
Sure.
But I also didn't hate it, you know, like I did enjoy it. I just wish that we got a little bit more in there and had a little bit less of all this dialogue.
Sure. I definitely agree there's too much text and too much dialogue, that's for sure. But I just love the art so much. But anyway, okay, so, you know, we could have reviewed 20 different versions of Aquaman. As I mentioned earlier, Stephen Skeets and Jim Aparo did a great run in the late 60s. That led to another run by David Michelinie and Jim Aparo, as well as other people doing him in the 70s. He was never a top seller, and so he'd be in Adventure Comics, then he'd have his own series, and that would get canceled. Then he'd go back to Adventure Comics, back and forth. He was a pretty prominent member of the Justice League. Then in 1985, as we mentioned, he got his own miniseries with art by Craig Hamilton. There was supposed to be a follow-up apparently, but it didn't happen. And they'd even done like sketches or a few pages or something. I'm not sure what happened there. But instead, they decided to do a miniseries drawn by Curt Swan. And apparently the origin that we're about to read was thought of after as a way to set up the miniseries. That's the way I remember it anyway. And I think this story was actually written for the Secret Origins series, edited by Roy Thomas, but then they decided to publish it on its own. So I think that does help because to me it does feel like an issue of Secret Origins, and I'll talk about that later. But Josh, you're going to tell us what happened in this one.
No, I believe Paul.
Oh, I believe Paul is
yes.
going to tell us. Oh my gosh, Paul's like, what am I here for? Okay.
You know, the good thing is I like it so much because if I hadn't, then I would say yes. Let Josh please, because there are so many good things I can say about this that I almost don't know where to start. So let me just pluck them out of the air, and we'll see what I say. Okay. I think that in the late 70s, early 80s, there was something called the Eagle Awards. Do you remember them?
Yes.
And, you know, like X-Men would win the Eagle Award for Best Comic and this, and the Eagle Award Best Artist, Best Individual Story, Best Continuing Story. But I think by the end of the 80s, I think they were pretty defunct, unfortunately. I mention this because if the Eagle Awards were still going in 1989, I'd say absolutely The Legend of Aquaman Special #1, new format, 1989, should win the Eagle Award for best one-off, you know, or best individual issue. I think it is just about perfect. I think that it deserves to be hardbound.
Okay.
As a storybook, hardbound.
Okay.
That would be enjoyed by kids and adults alike. I think it's beautifully told because Curt Swan is, one of those artists for whom it's not about being flashy, it's about telling the story.
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
Eric Shanower does a great job of inking him, so the art is really attractive and appealing.
Mhm.
And Keith Giffen and Robert Loren Fleming made a good combination in the 80s with plotting and writing. And I don't think they could possibly have written it better. I don't think any part of this could possibly have been done better. It provides such tremendous rationalization for Aquaman that any disbelief that I referred to, I couldn't suspend my disbelief
Mhm.
regarding Aquaman, and that was the biggest problem. Forget it. I don't have that problem at all with this origin story. And I'll get to the story in just a second. But the rationalization for everything is so good that even that crappy costume that always
Yeah.
turned me off. My God, at least Submariner went around with a pair of Speedos and a couple of wings on his ankles.
Right.
I mean, that I could accept. This guy, my God, he gets dressed every morning, puts on the same, green pants and orange top, and he even puts gloves on. You're underwater. What the hell are you doing wearing gloves? However, why is he wearing this costume? Because that's the outfit they made all the prisoners wear in Atlantis. All of them. He's not the only one with bad dress sense, This is a prison uniform.
Right.
And his trusted advisor and closest friend Volko says to him, I think, why are you still wearing this? Much later on when he doesn't have to wear it, he's, like king of Atlantis, because it's a reminder for him that he was once imprisoned by a brutal dictatorship in Atlantis. And I thought, yeah, that's great. Yes, I can get behind that 100%. Now, just about that stupid A on the belt, A for Aquaman. It's not an A. It's a symbol from Atlantis that was used, like with the aquarium and other such stuff. So it's like with Superman's, symbol on his chest. It's not an S. Of course, it was an S,
Right.
but they cleverly turned it into alien type.
Right,
and so it's not an S. You're just looking at it. Your mind is making it into an S. It's alien. It's not an S. My simple mind made that into an A for Aquaman.
Sure.
No, it's not. It's part of the architecture design, that was in Atlantis before. So those are already a whole load of good things that I've already said, and I haven't even said the story. And I've still got more. Wait, there's more. And look at the cover. If you see the cover, the logo style, they paid attention. They made it as watery as possible. The A is like a spear kind of.
Good point. Yep.
So they bothered to make the logo as authentic as it could be. So all that, so good, so good. And then in the story itself, what do we find? Do we find and I'm sorry, Michael, I have to say, do we find the usual corny stuff? Oh, my dad, let me tell you now, I've lied to you all this time. I mean, the husband could say, damn it, my God, you mean my life's been a lie? My married life's been a lie. So none of this nonsense about, he was trained by his father in the first place. God knows how he's withstood the pressure in the depths. But of course, there's the 100 secrets, very convenient, And then none of this nonsense about, I happen to be from Atlantis, but, you would never have known it. But I'm just telling you now on my deathbed. So, no, he's born in Atlantis. He's seemingly abandoned like a child from the time of Sparta. In the ancient Greece, the Spartans used to put 2-year-olds on a hill, and then the 2-year-old would have to make his way back to the group, the camp. And if he did, okay, then he's got warrior instincts. And if he didn't, tough. You know, he would be eaten by whoever or starved to death or whatever. And
the way it should be now, anyway.
It reminded me of that. He's abandoned. He's like abandoned on a, you know, he's like 2 years old or something. And so then we go on from that. And then his father, does he have a human father? No, he doesn't. He comes across him, you know, this man, Arthur Curry, who's in charge of the lighthouse. Do they instantly bond? No, they don't. They have a very understandable struggle because, you know, Arthur Curry, the lighthouse guy, he's very fiercely independent, proud of what he does, and who's this naked sea kind of person doing stuff to him. And so it takes time for them to develop, you know, a relationship. And look, he's even got his Aquaman all tied up like he's a criminal. So, you know, it takes time, and it develops over time. And I love the way that the ice is finally broken, because the Arthur Curry, the lighthouse guy, is cussing.
Right.
You know, he's cussing, you know, whatever. And just like a bird that mimics, this is all Aquaman can do, is copy his cussing. Mm-hmm. He copies his cussing, it makes him laugh, the ice is broken, the relationship is established. And look how beautifully it's told. You know, they've got the 9 panels, I was going to say equal size, but probably not equal size.
Oh, roughly.
Yeah, about that, yeah.
It reminds me a bit of Ditko. You know, Ditko used to do like 9 panels. At the same time, never skimp on the action or the storytelling. He achieved both, you know, even within a rigid 9-panel page. And this is what Curt Swan and Eric Shanower do here. Look at that beautiful storytelling. Mm-hmm. This is why it deserves to be hardbound and sold, you know, in bookstores that way. It's just beautiful. It's perfect. And so in that relationship, the relationship is established there in a very, very good way. And then you just go on from here. And, you know, over time, there's the learning and the bonding. And I thought to myself earlier, I would describe this as a love story. And when we use these words, love story, we automatically think of like Ryan O'Neal and Ali McGraw from the movie. But this is between, you know, a middle-aged man and a young guy. And it sounds like, well, what am I saying? Is it some kind of ancient Greece get together in Athens? Like, no, it's not. This is just a pure love of love and respect between what is becoming a father and an adopted son. And so it's beautiful to see. And the, you know, writers and artists, they develop the story very well. But of course, we have to move the plot on. And now Arthur Curry has become old. He knows that other people, probably from Atlantis, are coming hunting for Aquaman. And of course, he knows that he's going to die, and that's it. But he's prepared his son. And that's a great full page where Aquaman bursts in and says, "Father." You see, it tells you that that's the relationship. That's what it reached. But okay, we've moved the plot on. Now it's time for, you know, some serious action, but not before we have the beautiful page here where he's just sitting on a rock in the, you know, as sun is setting and reading his father's journal so that he learns, you know, all the truth about things. Great. And now we can, then it goes on. Okay, he's got to go. What's he going to do? And, you know, eventually he's going to find Atlantis. He's going to find these bad people. And after all the experiences he has on land, which are quite funny. Yeah. Very well written again about how his experiences in the city. He needs clothes. Okay, so he smashes a window and puts clothes on. He doesn't think of it like as a crime or anything like that. And it's just all delightful. All right. And then finally he's back in the water. And the one major coincidence here, they needed it. Otherwise, I mean, this would be a never ending story. he coincidentally comes across Atlantis much easier than otherwise expected. And what does he find? What does he find? It's ruled by a dictatorship. And, he's taken prisoner, and there he is in jail. He's a jailbird. This is such a great origin, such a great one. He's a jailbird by Atlantean dictatorship standards, and that's where he's got his uniform. As we know, it's a prison uniform, but he knows that his mother is here somewhere. He knows that his mother is in Atlantis, because somebody gave birth to him, obviously, and you think that he's going to end up with this scene of mother son, but no, it never happens, does it? Because before that could even happen, she dies. And with her death, now he's free to kind of express his rage because, there's nothing to lose now. Before, he just bided his time and wanted to eventually get reunited with his mother. But now he can let loose, and he realizes he's got this great strength, and others realize he's got this great strength. And then the relationship with Volko is established. So the story is it's moving along at such a good pace, a better pace than I'm explaining it. And everything is so well thought out. The rationalization for everything is just so good. But then, he leaves, escapes, manages to escape this, and that's it. And off he goes and, discovers the Justice League, and they discover him, and so on. And it could have ended there, I guess, but no. We still go on, and when he's eventually gets back there, what does he discover? That the dictatorship has been overthrown, and it's now peaceful and civilized. Okay, so is that the end of it? No, that's not the end of it, because the mother, of course, has died, but it's soon established that she was royalty and he is royalty. Okay, so now we have a good reason for him to become king of Atlantis. And I thought it was very touching that even though he reluctantly became king, he did it for his mother.
Right.
He's so humble and grounded, even though he's underwater. Again, sorry, but again, he keeps his prison uniform. As the reminder, he keeps his prison uniform. It's amazing to me that in one issue, I was transformed from despising that uniform that I've despised for decades and decades into I love it. I love it because of what it means. So then, it looks like happy days. He meets Mira. They have a child. Everything couldn't possibly be better. But no, there has to be something that drives him off, and that's the death of his son. So I'll admit there are a couple of things I still don't quite understand, as great as I think this issue is. A couple of things. So I'm hoping the two of you can explain it for me. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Sure.
So he was born in Atlantis. He was abandoned in Atlantis because his mother was afraid that he might be deformed or something like this.
Right.
Because he had blonde hair, right?
Blonde hair and white skin, which is the thing that I felt was weird about this issue, was the fact that none of the other Atlanteans looked different from him. Like, even when he's in jail, there is a panel. Let me see if I could find it. He's literally right here. There looks to be somebody right there in the background that looks exactly like him.
Good point.
Blonde hair, white skin,
maybe that's why he's in jail, though. It could be why he's in jail.
True, but even when they're out of jail, like, the guards look like him as well. Like, they're all white. Yeah. I don't know. It was strange. Again, when I was first reading this at the beginning of the issue, I thought that the Atlanteans would have a different look to them. Maybe have like a palish blue skin or something to differentiate him.
Like the Marvel Atlanteans do.
Yeah.
Right.
Should. No, I agree with you, and I guess I was so blown away, but this issue was so good to me that I've overlooked any little but significant things like that. I tend to think maybe they were descendants of Scandinavians, but I won't go that far. So who is his father?
You mean what is his? Oh, that's a good question. I believe so. This is where it gets confusing for me because we have to point out that within 2 years of this, his origin was rebooted again by Peter David in Time and Tide. And I believe that Peter David explained who his Atlantean father was, but I think at this point they're just not revealing it. So Tom, is it Arthur? Sorry, his father's name in this is Arthur Curry, but it's quickly rebooted to be, I think,
Thomas Curry was, and in the last origin as well, it was Tom or Thomas.
That's
Curry.
right. That's right. Yeah. Thomas Curry. Okay. So, but I think, sorry.
I was just going to say, I prefer this version where it's so touching that the lighthouse man gives him his name because he's alien. Aquaman is alien. He doesn't have his name. He's alien. So he gave him his name. Some people might leave behind a ring to remember me by, or this, or that. He gave him his name. That's so touching and perfect. You don't need to spoil it by saying, well, actually, the guy's name was Tom. No, it just destroys the poignancy of that. So I as much as I think Peter David is a great writer, I think that was a big mistake. So is our consensus then that his mother, whose royalty got knocked up somehow by an alien? What was?
No, by
a human, or I would assume
Atlantean.
In this version, it was another Atlantean. Yeah.
Okay,
because it was embarrassing. It was like royal scandal or something.
Okay.
They explain it in Atlantis Chronicles and in Time and Tide, but I just can't remember what it was, to be honest.
All right, but he's some guy who, love him. He was a love him and leave him type.
Exactly.
Right.
You could say that. Yeah.
He was a Sagittarian. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, the thing is, So, okay, before we say anything else, Josh, we got to hear, what did you think of this issue?
I loved it. This origin was really great, I thought. Similar enough to the original one where it doesn't feel like a crazy departure. Sure. But I think it's definitely a better explanation of Arthur's power. And also, I feel like he has a better connection with Atlantis. In the other one, he does meet his mother and know his mother, and she tells him about Atlantis. But in this one, he has to discover it on his own. And even though he probably finds Atlantis at the same age in both origins, I feel like in this one, because he is born there and abandoned by them, and then has to learn to figure his way back, he feels way more connected in this story.
Right.
I also love the storytelling in this issue. The fact that we get almost full pages with no dialogue or no description of what's going on. We get to just see everything. It's fantastic. Even when he is with his adopted father, we have these beats where they're just together and working together and learning about each other. It's fantastic. Like particularly too, like later on when he does have that bonding moment and he imitates him here and like curses. We even get this like panel in between him cursing and his dad laughing of just like a moment where his dad is like thinking about it and like a moment for him to like breathe it. It's great. I really I really love this issue a lot. Even with those like small little things that feel a little bit off about it, like the Atlanteans looking like him, or the coincidence of him finding his mother while also in prison. Like, I'm not quite sure how while he was in prison he would see his mother all the time, but even besides those small little things, I love it so much. I think it's fantastic. Definitely the best Aquaman comic book I've read. Definitely the most memorable, I think.
I mean, I'll have you both know that, as I touched on earlier, this exact creative team then went on to do a 5-issue miniseries right after this.
Right. I'm definitely going to be reading that after seeing this.
Check it out. Absolutely. I got to say that this storytelling is the sweet spot, because we have essentially a 1950s comic book artist, Curt Swan, working with a 1970s, 80s plotter, which is Keith Giffen, and then a younger 1990s writer, Robert Loren Fleming, who really only did Valor. I think that's I'm not really familiar with his writing, but
he did Thriller in the early 80s.
Okay, there you go. Was it good?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so we have an interesting time for DC. I love, again, like, first of all, Curt Swan is one of my favorite artists. I could read any story drawn by him, but this issue is great. We talked about the silent panels, the really straightforward, simple storytelling, which we also have to give credit to Keith Giffen too, because he laid it out. But the panels you mentioned, Josh, where the silent panel of the father's reaction in between, right before he breaks down and laughs, like, those moments are great. I love, the stuff at the beginning, the storytelling of the way he meets the father. Even if you just jump back to the first few pages, like, just the baby at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, looking up. Well, I'll just wait till you get there. Yeah. Looking up, like, this whole page is great. Like, look, you can just take a step back and look at how each panel, there's 2 repeated layouts, but each panel is very different. The camera's in, the camera's out, the camera's up, it's down. It's just great stuff. And then as you go through and flip through these pages, you see the same type of thing throughout. And as far as Curt Swan, like, again, the layouts are by Keith Giffen, but as far as Curt Swan, there's a few moments that really stand out as far as his facial expressions. Obviously, the body language of him coming in and shouting "Father," that's really nice.
And you know what I really love about that moment too is not only do they let the art speak for itself and tell the story, they also tell a story by almost omitting dialogue. We see right before the whole father incident, like right when he comes in, this page, they're describing him as the young man leaves the old man. Like, they're not, they never say, and they spent so much time together, they were quite like father and son. We don't have to have these moments. We don't have to have like afterwards him thinking like, and from that moment on, I'm gonna take over the name Arthur Curry, and that's how we just see it in the story. The first time we obviously see them becoming father and son, but this is the first time we see them say it, and it's just in the natural dialogue of what's happening. I don't even know if we learn Arthur Curry's name up until this point.
That's a great point.
You know what I mean? Like, we just see it here in the thing, and then later on he calls himself Arthur. It's so smart in how it tells the story.
Because what it is it's as good as writing should be when it's done well in a novel or a TV show, right? Like, and as much as I love 70s and 80s comics, even the very best 80s writers, they would have fallen into all the traps you're talking about. Like when, and I don't want to pick on anyone, I won't name names, but when Arthur comes through the door and his father's been kidnapped, it would have been, he's not here. I should call out his name. Father, he's not, I guess he's not here. And then they would explain what he's going to do and what he's thinking. But any kid could read this and they could understand exactly what's going on. So there's no reason, all those crutches that the 80s writers used, there's really no excuse for them because we didn't need them. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy those comics, but at the end of the day, this is the kind of writing we should have been getting from everyone, but we weren't. So it's definitely a standout. Yeah, it's definitely a standout. Now, that being said, as far as the actual origin of Aquaman, I still prefer the Silver Age version. I prefer the woman, like the lonely lighthouse keeper, discovering the woman washed up onto, onto the whatever. He goes and rescues her. They have a baby together. To me, that origin is more fairy tale like this origin is great, don't get me wrong. The idea of him coming from Atlantis, it's a little bit closer to something like Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman is from Paradise Island and she comes to man's world, right? So this is a little bit closer to that, but I just more like the idea of like I said, Arthur Curry meeting this woman, and this is the origin that Jeff Johns actually brought back in 2011, and it's the origin used in the movie, completely screwed up in the movie, of course. Done terribly, but I do think it's the most primal origin. And so, one of my pet peeves, because I have so much free time in my hands, is I like to try and figure out how I can kind of incorporate the different versions together. And I figure most of the scenes at the beginning of this could, they could have just said, well, he was with the father first and then he ended up at the bottom of the ocean and I don't know. There's a way to do it, but I personally, while I do love this issue as a story, I just wish they could have tried to keep more of the original origin in here, or at least the Silver Age origin.
Well, I think that the way to do that is you have the queen, the mother, come to land, fall in love with Arthur Curry, and then she goes back to Atlantis and finds out that she is pregnant, has Arthur in Atlantis, and then abandons him, like what happens here. And he just happens to find himself back to his father.
So basically, the father would not know that this is his son. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool, right? Like that gives it another twist. You're right. Yeah. So there you go. That's my compromise origin for Aquaman, Paul. What do you think? And copyright Josh and Mike.
I'm glad that you both liked it. Yeah.
Okay, that's all you're gonna say. All right. So yeah, and we're all fans of Curt Swan. Have you ever read Valor, Paul?
No, I've seen it, but no, I haven't. It's
pretty good. The first half of the series were all written by Robert Loren Fleming, and then Mark Waid took over. And that was when DC was rebooting every 5 minutes, and that led into 0 Hour, and that wiped everything out again. So it's almost like one of those series. I don't think they've ever reprinted it, and they probably never will because it's all been made redundant. But it's a pretty decent series. But anyway, like I said, we could have reviewed more Aquaman, but there's only so much time on this podcast, so we just reviewed the first 3 versions of his origin. If you want to follow up for more, there's Atlantis Chronicles, then there's Aquaman Time and Tide. And then I think his origin is pretty consistent until the New 52 when they kind of tweak it again and make it closer to this one. But believe me, there are a lot of good Aquaman comics. Unfortunately, because I'm downsizing, I actually sold like a full short box worth of Aquaman comics for like $100 a few years ago. I'm kind of regretting that now as we're going through this because I had all these issues.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's some good stuff in there. Do you have anything else to say about Aquaman, Paul? Did you see any of the movies?
I do have one thing to say.
Sure.
Another good thing, by the way. Didn't see the movies. I wasn't interested in the slightest.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, I'm not. No, thank you. I like the Christopher Nolan Batmans, and that's about it. But the one final very good thing I want to say is that people could say, well, what a corny name, Aquaman. He didn't name himself.
Oh, you're still going on about it. Okay, gotcha.
This is a mocking name given to him by the other prisoners, I think. or guards, maybe. People in Atlantis gave him this name mockingly. So I thought that's another great little tweak, because it's not like, yeah, my name's Aquaman, and look, I've got an A on my buckle. No, he didn't name himself. It's a mocking name, and it's not an A on the buckle. I thought, yeah, okay, this guy's good.
I think, this is, again, post-crisis. This was the time when DC was kind of doing that for all their characters. They were trying to find ways to, I guess you could say, golden age-ify all other characters and get rid of a lot of that corny stuff. I think sometimes they throw out the baby with the bathwater. But some of these ideas, like especially the prison uniform, are very clever, I think. Like, if you can imagine a good Aquaman movie where he's arrested and he has like just regular clothes, or he has the green Speedo on, and then he's put in prison, and he all of a sudden he gets the costume and he walks out, and you see this wide shot of 1,000 people all wearing the same costume. That'd be a great moment in a movie, I think, eh?
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, I love me some Aquaman, that's for sure. Paul, I want to thank you for coming on, even though you're kind of only half of an Aquaman fan.
Yeah, and that's even belated thanks to Craig Hamilton and Keith Giffen and Curt Swan and Peter David.
Right. So yeah, we always appreciate your input.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. We will be seeing more of Aquaman soon on this show. Not much though. Maybe another Justice League appearance. That's about it for now. But yeah, be sure to join us next week, because as a big follow-up to Aquaman, we're going to be talking about the Seven Soldiers, which Aquaman has no connection to. But yeah,
Perfect.
Seven Soldiers are kind of like the Justice League, but the B Justice Society, put it that way.
Right.
Which you'll find out more in our next episode. But that's pretty much it. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. You can find all of our stuff over on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find all of the video formats of the podcast on our YouTube channel. So go check them out. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the comics and things we're talking about. We want to keep that conversation going. So yeah, until next time.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye.